Hi, I'm Heather Spence, and I'm presenting my collaboration with Mark Ballora, our project Layers of Meaning, the Ocean's Natural Acoustics and the Music of its Dataset. A quick overview of what I'll be covering, an introduction to the role of the National Academy's Keck Futures Initiative in this project, an introduction to the Mesoamerican Reef System and my methods for recording soundscapes, going into the sound design of particular pieces, along with some samples to hear. And this is along a gradient from soundscape recordings with instruments to instruments with duty cycle interpretation sampling, and then getting onto soundscapes and instruments layered with sonification of sound data. And then I'll be looking at some of the outcomes and future work. This is Mark Ballora standing with our poster at the National Academy's Keck Futures Initiative mid-cycle grant meeting for this project. And we were introduced initially at the going to a National Academies meeting on the oceans, out of which there were opportunities to apply for funding, which is combining our perspectives, his perspective coming from electronic music and sonification, and my perspective coming from marine biology, music, and composing. I want to dedicate this presentation to his memory. There's so much more that we wanted to do together, but I continue to be inspired by him, and I'm thankful for the time that we had together. The Mesoamerican Reef System, also known as the Great Mayan Reef, located from the top of the Yucatan Peninsula on down to Honduras. I do my soundscape recording in this area, usually in the Mexican state of Quintana Roo, where there really is a lack of monitoring. And so I started a passive acoustic monitoring project to bring more information to inform management of the area. My research, soundscape recording there involves placing underwater microphone systems, hydrophones on the seafloor or into installations and leaving them there so that they can record day and night without my presence. Generally, I use a duty cycle sampling of 30 seconds every 15 minutes. And this is often difficult to record continuously due to memory constraints, power constraints, and site access constraints. First piece I'd like to share with you is entitled Reef Recall. This is a soundscape composition layered with a live cello kind of tour guide with some spoken word educational interludes. Underwater recordings are both raw and manipulated, and the cello provides a way to help tune the ear into key patterns in the soundscape, which can be a little bit difficult to get at because there's snapping shrimp sound that sounds like a lot of static, and some of the patterns are a bit subtle. So let's listen into a little snippet of Reef Recall. Next, I'd like to get into a piece called Reef Recall Remix Duty Cycle Mysteries. This piece is based off of the original Reef Recall and is actually sampling it much in the same way. In research, we sample the ocean soundscape. The ratio of samples is the same as in ocean research. And when you listen to it, you'll actually, they sort of blend together a little bit through reverb, which is basically mimicking the way that scientists extrapolate in the gaps between data. Let's have a listen to Reef Recall Remix. So that was a segment of Reef Recall Remix. Now we're going to turn to a piece called Nightfish. This is based on a science paper that I published on nocturnal fish sounds. It incorporates the actual sound files that were used in that paper, cello and viola da gamba. By the way, I played stringed instruments, so they work their way into these pieces, and lyrics, vocals, and they are based on, again, this idea of sampling the actual text of the paper. So when you hear the lyrics, there are real words there, but they are not strung together in complete sentences. And so it gives you a sense of some of the key concepts in the paper without filling in all of the details if you actually read the paper. So let's have a listen to a little section of Nightfish. So now let's have a quick look at Midnight Rhythm and Reef Rem Ember. These are using the same types of methods, so I'm going to focus on Midnight Rhythm. Here, some of the same elements, layers of instruments. In this case, we also have the soundscape data, but we also have sonification of sound. So here you have the tracks that you see here with the green and red segments and the blue vertical lines. So this is a music production method designed to identify the chunks of audio elements. And it's basically then used so that if you want to take a line of recorded music and make it fit the tempo more exactly, you can quantize it to fit that tempo, and it stretches or compresses these chunks. So in this case, this process of detecting transients and applying the bend markers, this is actually providing a way to sonify sound itself. It's giving an indication of the complexity, rhythmic complexity of that soundscape recording. So in this, you're going to hear different layers. This is taking you through a journey at the midnight hour across lunar phases. The flute samples are from Agatha Wang, evoking these different lunar phases. There's also cello. You hear the soundscape recording itself, but then you hear these percussive elements, and those are the sonifications of the complexity of that soundscape. So let's have a listen to a section of Midnight Rhythm. So it'd be interesting to do more work on responses to this. This is an initial look at some of the responses to this music. You can see there's actually a lot of terrestrial references. So that's something I'd like to look into further. Also, there are some kind of conflicting emotion words used. So I think that would also be interesting to look into further. For future work, fortunate to be part of another NACV funded project, the Ocean Memory Project. And there are some synergistic themes with that project. So I think exploring those connections is going to be really interesting. Something we definitely always plan to do with these pieces is called layers of meaning, add on additional layers of environmental data. So there's the soundscape, there's the instruments, there's the sonification of sound, but then also sonification of environmental data like temperature and salinity, wave information, other kinds of environmental information. And perhaps that would help to indicate some additional patterns and correlations. I also want to highlight, I think there is a lot of potential for using music production tools to combine with scientific and musical perspectives, better understand the ocean soundscape. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see what new collaborations and perspectives we can form, bringing these different perspectives together. So I want to give a big thank you to all of my collaborators and sponsors, and be very interested to hear any questions or input that you might have. Thank you.